Hey friends, I have here a bullet casing that's been turned into the shape of a cross by an artist. And I was given this at my ordination. So when I became a pastor, a friend gave this to me as a reminder of the pastoral calling, of what it looks like to be a minister, to seek transformation from death dealing to life giving, from death and violence to peace and life and hope. I've been meditating a lot with this week in light of the Texas shooting at Robb Elementary School, but also because that came on the heels of the Buffalo shooting and the recent report from the Southern Baptist Convention about their horrendous cover-up around sexual abuse. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and so that one hits really close to home. I don't want to offer any religious platitudes today. I do want to point us to Scripture, though. In the book of Exodus, God sees the pain of those people who are oppressed. God hears their cry for help. And it says that God feels their pain, that God knows it intimately. I think about throughout Scripture, the Psalms and the prophets and into the New Testament, how God stands against injustice and calls God's people to push back against injustice in the world. And I do think about the cross as God's response to violence, that Jesus doesn't respond with more violence, but with sacrificial love and of suffering with us. So if you wonder where God is in all this, I think God's sad. I think God's weeping with those families who are hurting. And I think that God's frustrated by our inability to change, by our obsession with violence, by our belief that power and violence and the violent expression of power will solve problems. It's not working. It hasn't worked in the past, and it won't work in the future. And so, as a pastor, as best I can, I'll continue to call us to the active, non-violent way of Jesus, the way of peace and wholeness. Many of you know that I understand the Christian life to be one of non-violence in the manner of Jesus. And so we'll offer up this alternate way of doing life, a more hopeful way of living, a way that points to change and transformation, life in the midst of death. And I remain hopeful. It's a tricky thing to be hopeful in the midst of situations like this. If you're struggling with that, that's okay. I'll be hopeful on your behalf right now. Because as we sang this last Sunday, I refuse to allow the foxes in the vineyard to steal my joy. I believe that God has a way forward of peace. Grace and peace, friends.